Then the master said to his servant, "Go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor, and the maimed, and the lame, and the blind." And the servant said, "Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room." Then the master said to the servant, "Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper." Now, great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it began to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land nor for the dung heap, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Amen.
Thank you. I before we've even got to discuss this, Leslie's hands up. That's how you put people to the post. Basically, I'd like us to look at the first bit about the healing of the man, because I don't want to lose that. There's some very weighty bits in this passage, and so I'd like to do that first and then move on and work our way through the passage as a whole. But I've got two hands up. Go for it, Leslie, and then Carolyn.
I would like to take exception to the wording that somebody marries a wife. You do not marry a wife, you marry a lady who becomes your wife. It's a bit like asking somebody if they should put some toast in the toaster for you. It's just not correct. You put bread in the toaster to make the toast, and you don't marry a wife unless you're marrying somebody else's wife.
When you get to heaven, you can take it out with Tyndall.
That's all I want to say, really, Nigel. Just to start well this morning.
Okay.
I thought a little controversy would be good.
Well, as far down the passage as that comes, I'm sure it'll run for the week, at least. But yes, I take your point. But also, the status of people, they were betrothed to each other from a very early age. And so very often you knew who you were going to marry and you're already engaged to them, and the commitment of the families was already there before you actually married them. So the terminology might be a little bit different to ours, and that's what they might be trying to say in the passage as well. So yeah, I'm not making excuses for it, but I agree with you on the English language there, Leslie, but I think we've got to be careful not to anglicize it too much. There we go. Carolyn?
I'll lower my hand now, having rested my case.
Oh no, I'm sure it'll come up again. Carolyn?
No, mine was more on the banquet, which we haven't reached yet, so... Yeah.
If you've got a quick question, we can go for it.
Well, just basically, as you read that, nobody does that. And I sort of just made me realise that nobody actually does what it said in that passage, not as far as I've seen anyway. So
maybe you should start it, Carolyn.
We will
come to your banquet.
We
Yeah.
will get there. I know some people who do that. But there we
I know
go.
J. John does, doesn't he?
I don't know about J. John, but
Yeah.
I know people who have been very welcoming. Right, we will get on to that and look forward to that. So thank you both, Leslie and Carolyn, for whetting our appetites for what lies ahead in this week. But actually, let's go to the healing. So it's verses 1 through to 6. And a couple of things with this. Basically, they were eating at the house of a ruler of the Philistines. So not Philistines, Pharisees, right? So actually, no one budged until I realised it. Basically, so it's not just one of the Pharisees; it's a ruling person of the Pharisees, who was a culture shaper, kind of, drove things. That's where he was eating. And I think that's interesting. I think another thing, in my Bible, it says the man had dropsy, which is an old term for where fluid gathers in various parts of the body. So different translations will have that. Some people say, well, actually the term they used could be broader than dropsy. It might be other things. So I'll leave that hanging there as one of the conditions. And then Jesus says that, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So in previous chapters, they decided it wasn't lawful and accused him. Here, before he does the healing, he asks them, asks the ruler of the Pharisees and his contingent that question. And that's something just to throw in there as well. And it says they couldn't reply to these things. So there's some very interesting things going on. So I'll just kind of poke a few things on the way through the passage and then open it up. Carolyn, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking. I watched a thing on elephants last night, and they spend a very, very long time filming them. And there was these baby elephants, and they didn't actually die, thank God. But they were caught in the mud and they were drowning. And I kind of, at one point, I have actually seen it where, I know this isn't relevant to, but it is relevant to Jesus because it's his creation, in that they spend a long time studying the animals, and then because of not interfering with nature, they don't save them. And it was very, it just made me think of that, really, that that you study an animal for a very long time, and then when it gets into the bad situation, you don't actually help it out, because that's, you're kind of interfering with it. So there were 10 baby elephants that died within the 5 years, but these 2 were okay. But it just sort of makes me think, well, if you're there, you have to step in. You have to step in because you're witnessing it, so you can't just let them go, Anyway, there you go. I don't think I'll... it's quite hard to those, really.
So yeah, and I've also got a bit of a theory. People who have a care for animals tend to be some very caring people. I know in our church, some of those that have care for the cats and things like that, and badgers and all the rest, are some incredibly caring people about people as well. I think so I think yes, there's a care and a tenderness in Jesus that isn't in the camera crew of some BBC or other programs. But thanks, Carolyn. David,
would they not? Oh, I think it's that they feel they shouldn't, but I don't know if they don't care.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I might be painting them in the wrong light. Yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean to paint them in a bad light. It's just
yeah. It's difficult, very difficult. Thanks, Carolyn. David.
Moving away from elephants onto the Pharisees, it was interesting that in the previous chapter, Jesus was teaching on the Sabbath in the synagogue and was challenged on this issue of healing on the Sabbath, whether it was right or not. But now it happened as he went into the house of one of the rulers. So he's been invited, I presume. He hasn't just sort of bashed the door down and walked in. He's been invited by the Pharisees. Now, were the Pharisees, are we talking here about somebody like Nicodemus, who perhaps is being challenged by what Jesus has done? Or is it the Pharisees trying to catch him out? And it's interesting because he immediately, and behold, there was a certain man before him. So I don't know whether they've got this guy in particularly to have Jesus heal him. But it's interesting. On the Sabbath, are they allowed to actually have meetings for eating and things like that? Mm-hmm. I presume that that's okay.
Yeah.
But is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? But they kept silent because they're actually either they're waiting for Jesus to explain to them, which is a challenge to what they've been taught before, or they're looking to trap him. And I know some commentaries it says it's about looking to trap him. But I'm just wondering, as he's been invited into this house, are the Pharisees being challenged themselves as to whether what they're following so far is being correct, or whether they're actually, it's reaching into the heart? And it just reminds me that as we read the words in the scriptures, it's not enough just to read the words and to jump to conclusion, but it's actually getting into the words and asking the Holy Spirit just to reveal to you the sorts of things, or reveal to me, the sorts of things that may have been going on. Because sometimes we're challenged in what we've previously thought was going on, and then it sort of brings a fresh revelation to your heart. And whenever we've heard the word Pharisees, it's all don't like the Pharisees, they're the baddies. But I mean, Nicodemus was a Pharisee, leader of the Pharisees, yet he came to understand who Christ actually was. And although not totally revelationary, but he was certainly sympathetic and moved towards that. So it's quite interesting what's going on here, and trying to see what could possibly be happening.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I think it's getting those assumptions out, and this is sometimes what I'm trying to do when we walk through a story. Yeah. Is I don't want to miss the bits, and this is why we're focused on this healing, because actually I'm desperate to get onto the banquet and some of the things Carolyn mentioned. I think but actually I think walking this through. And this is where I think drama would be really helpful. You get a whole lot of actors. Now, what would it be like to be that man? And then think from his perspective. What would it be like to act out a Pharisee? Where is he coming from? How can I think of that so I act the part well? And if you had some of that going on, you'd have a very different look than some of the commentaries. And I think that's very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't at this stage challenge them with the word hypocrites. There's no attack on these Pharisees. He just asks the question: is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And again, he talks about his donkey and what have you, and just reaffirms what he'd been saying before. So it's quite interesting doing this Bible study, because I've read through this so many times in my life before, and as you read through it fast, you just sort of take in what you've always thought. But as you concentrate on this and think about what's actually really going on here, I can see Pharisees really being challenged by what Jesus is saying against the law that they've been studying, and defining what is work on a Sabbath, and anyhow. Absolutely.
And I think there's some big questions there, and I think how I can understand the urgency of rescuing someone from a well, but actually, is this an urgent case? There must be thoughts like that, and I think it's a wonderful world of smoke and mirrors of the political stuff with the Pharisees. You never really know, is Jesus being set up or is he not? Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's really obvious what they're doing, sometimes it's not. I think Very,
But if
very
he's
good.
being invited into the house, it's almost like a sort of, well, are they setting him up, or is it a quiet, because they're not in the open. Not everybody can see what's going on, so they're doing it quietly on their own. So maybe the Pharisees feel threatened if they were to go and ask Jesus in public these things. So they're trying to, I don't know, maybe they're trying to learn, or maybe they're trying to set him up.
Or maybe it's a wonderful world. We'll never know. It's somewhere in between. Probably both and.
We'll probably meet all the Pharisees when we get there.
Find the ones that Jesus did reach, and then realise
right,
we were totally. Yeah, Leslie and then Carolyn.
Well, maybe this prominent Pharisee was wanting to learn how to do it. Who knows? He was being watched carefully, and for me, it's interesting that Jesus now asks whether it's lawful. He preempts the problem that could come up if they challenge him. He actually asks, and none of them want to actually say anything. What was the other thing I was looking at? There are 7 recorded miracles apparently, and Luke talks about 5 of them. So that's what these are. There was something else I was looking at as well. Maybe it was mainly the fact that he preempted their question, their objection to him healing on the Sabbath by asking them, is it lawful? And they didn't say anything. I mean, for me, if you've had some horrendous, maybe painful condition for years, it is as important as pulling an animal out of a ditch, isn't it? You know, it's maybe not life-threatening, but it certainly gets in the way of a lot of stuff. Oh, I've just remembered what the other thing I was going to say was that on the Sabbath, if there was a meal, it would be prepared the day before. So they weren't breaking the Sabbath by doing work as they weren't supposed to. Yeah. So this meal would have been, I guess, cold. They wouldn't have had roast beef and Yorkshire pudding.
No,
or
lamb.
That's probably my little parcel of points there.
And I think we used to have traditions like this in churches, like in like the Methodist Church or the Baptist Church. You would have people be invited back for Sunday lunch. Well, this is on a Saturday, but quite often people went to different people's homes after synagogue. And so you had a similar kind of system, very different but similar, kind of invitation. So this was probably an invitation. Oh, come to mine after synagogue. I'm having a whole load of folks over. So there was some of that we think did happen in those cultures.
We used to do that. We used to always after church, well, in the early years of being Christians, we would have people coming back to us for lunch. Yeah. And another thing, when I was first a Christian, it wasn't a legalistic thing, but I just chose not to do things like washing on a Sunday. And also our kids were kind of encouraged. We didn't go and get weekend treats. We didn't shop on a Sunday. I mean, that's all kind of slipped now, and I'm probably part of the world again these days. But there were things that I felt I wanted to stop doing to make a difference in my life. And we still don't do a big shop on a Sunday, and we don't usually do washing either. Yeah. But it's more of a habit now than a conscious, I'm not going to do that because it's a special day.
You wouldn't feel guilty if you went and bought a pint of milk, is what you're saying.
No.
No.
And actually, when we lived in Liverpool, I seem to remember we tried to buy a bag of sugar on a Sunday, and it had to be wrapped in brown paper because it was breaking the bylaw. Now, whether that was something to do with church rules, I don't know, but that wouldn't be a problem now. But there were bylaws.
So the early 90s laws on shopping were changed in the UK. I remember because Mildred Porter, who was from the Lord's Day Observance Society and was in my church, was very, very upset by it. So so that's where your bag of sugar may have been allowed to have been bought. But, you know, there was a lot that shifted. Thanks, Leslie. Carolyn?
No, I was just going back to, it's not to do with the Sabbath, it's just to do with compassion. And like when he's mentioning about, well, if you've got an animal that's falling into a well, you'll pull it out, you won't just leave it. And I was just going back to that again about he's given us compassion. And I suppose with them it's money, it's their money, isn't it, an ox? I didn't think of it like that actually. But I was just thinking about how you don't leave something that's struggling or suffering, that's helpless. You go and do it no matter what. And I think no matter what, even if you're you're supposed to be doing this filming where it's all supposed to be in the wild, it's like you break that. You break that and you go and you do it. It's just it's all right. I've just got a bit of a thing. I should write to them.
And I think your compassion brings us very nicely back to the man with dropsy, or the man with the swelling of fluid, or in part of his body, and so it would have been disfiguring, and would have been an obvious thing going on there, visible illness, and actually, they kind of thought, well, why is Jesus doing something and claiming, something like an urgency law if an animal falls in a well, and not, this doesn't seem urgent. This guy's had it for years. I mean, we've known that, he's lucky we invited him, there might be other things like that going on. But actually, I looked into this for a sermon once, and I wondered what lies behind this. And there can be significant heart issues that someone has with this condition. And so we may have been underlying things we knew nothing about. It may have been more urgent than we realize, Jesus healing this man. But I'll just throw that in as well. Leslie, your hand's up. Go for it.
Yeah. Yes, you're right, Nigel. Medically speaking, that certainly could be the underlying reason here. So it's not just a few little swellings. It could be actually a serious heart defect. But not being medical, I don't really know. But I like the fact that you have said that. But I'm just looking here. In verse 4, Jesus heals the man. Taking hold of him, he healed him and sent him away. So he wasn't actually staying for the banquet. So it could have been, as David has already mentioned, a little bit of a setup, that they brought somebody in that looks a bit crook, to use the Australian vernacular here. And Jesus has healed him and sent him off. So he didn't stay for the dinner.
Yeah. Wow.
Went away healed.
Yeah. Left the people who were well healed and went away healed. There we go. David?
Yeah, just a point of clarity. Dropsy is a pathological accumulation of diluted lymph in the body tissues and cavities. The Message Bible puts it right before him. There was a man hugely swollen in his joints. So just to give you the picture.
Yeah. Thanks.
But that's the symptom of something, isn't it? It's not necessarily the reason why he had it.
Yeah.
So very good. So Jesus heals the man. The Pharisees are left without anything they can say, and the situation is left hanging awkward, and so I just sort of think, you do something nice and simple like inviting Jesus round for a meal, and actually you think, well, at least it's a nice, safe environment. Nothing can go wrong. We can ask him some serious questions over lunch. We can quiz him on some of his theology, and we can work through some of the stuff with him, over lunch. That sounds like a good idea. There's no such thing as a free business lunch. So there's some of that. Now, they may or may not have set this man up as a test. But if it is, Jesus has outmaneuvered them by asking them the question that they can't answer. And so the awkwardness around the meal, at the beginning of this meal, or part of the way through this meal, there's a man healed. There's awkward questions asked of Pharisees that they can't answer. So in terms of being a good guest in a house, he may have stirred things a little bit for the host. So if the host is wanting to have, I always have a good meal around my house, I want everything working well. Actually, here's a case where that's a little bit awkward. And things are set to get even more awkward. Very, very awkward. It's almost like awkward just begins, if you were the host, awkward, and your guests that you're trying to make happy and keep happy and make them all have a good time around your house. Actually, all of that is not set to continue because Jesus just turns up the notches. He's not come to leave things as they are. He's come to bring something in that is culture shaping, that is vastly beyond where they are. He's come to restore something of a heart for God. He's come to bring some of that stuff. And so you see this man shall cause the rising or falling of many in Israel is a very strong, and by him the hearts of many will be revealed. Inviting Jesus into your home, you're inviting change into your home. You're inviting someone into your home who transforms your home. Or challenges it severely. So I'll two hands up, David, and then Leslie.
Yeah, it's just it's sort of transitioning into the next piece, if I may, into
okay. Yeah, it's segue, is it?
That's right. I'm just getting this picture of what's going on, and they've been. He's been invited, or he went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees. So you've got, let's say, there's Nicodemus. So Nicodemus is there, but he's talking to the lawyers and the Pharisees. So I presume the lawyers are also like the Pharisees. They adhere to the scriptural law. They're not Roman lawyers, for instance. They're Pharisaic lawyers. So we've got the leader of the Pharisees, and we've got the other Pharisees around him, the followers. And then he's moving into this, and he's talking to the guests, not to the leader. He's talking to the guests who are there, and it's about actually. It speaks to me, and it just reminds me. I was reading not so long back Proverbs 25 and 6-7. It says, "Do not exalt yourself in the presence of the king, and do not stand in the place of the great. For it is better that he say to you, 'Come up here,' than you should be put lower in the presence of the prince whom your eyes have seen." And it's just actually linking back for the Pharisees into the scriptures, that actually the laws or the guidance in the scriptures adheres to what Christ is saying. And he's saying here, look, it's not bad to be honored, but it's bad for you to honor yourself.
Yeah.
It's not bad to be honored by somebody else, but it's bad for you to honor yourself. So when you come in with humility, not with an arrogance or a self-centeredness. And he says here, "For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted."
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting scenario when we look at that. Who he's addressing is addressing Pharisees who are there with the leader of the Pharisees there. I can just imagine them all sort of jockeying for position to sit next to the leader of the Pharisees, the Nicodemus type person. And he's noticing this, so he draws them away from the I don't know whether it's purposefully, but he draws them away from this whole business about healing into something that's more important, which is actually how they are behaving in relationship to what the scriptures are saying.
Yeah. And I think also for the Pharisees, they'd have looked at that and gone, oh, there's no king present, so we don't have to do that. Proverbs said there was a king present. Oh, no, there's no king present. It's only a Pharisee. Oh, no, we don't have to behave like that. We can push ourselves forward as much as we like. That's what legalism does, isn't it? It finds a way around the law to keep something bad in the heart going. And I think that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. Thanks, David. Leslie?
Just hopping back to verse 4, where it says they remain silent, and then verse 6, then they had nothing to say regarding this.
Not even a hallelujah.
I don't know why they had nothing to say. They could have mumbled and grumbled, but maybe because it was were they frightened to say anything, or was it because it was a lunch, you've got to watch your P's and Q's a bit? But the focus in this passage, first of all, is on Jesus's attention to this guy and the effect it's having on the religious leaders. Then he turns his attention in verse 7. He notices how the guests pick the places of honour at the table and tells them a parable. I mean, imagine if you've invited a few friends for dinner and you've got somebody there that doesn't just chat, normal small talk, but gets into. I mean, Jesus is challenging everything here, isn't he? He's challenging the leaders. He's challenging the wedding guests, and not only is he quietly challenging them, he's actually telling parables that really rub it in and really get the backs up. When you rub a cat, you don't rub it the wrong way, do you? But it's like, I just like the fact that he's moved his attention from one area to the next. So nobody is getting away with anything here unless you've come in quietly and you're waiting to be seated by your host. You're not looking to jump yourself up.
Now I've got this vision of backcombed Pharisees, which big hair, big beards. I think with this, I'm also thinking with what David raised about the guy left. I'm suddenly, he wasn't invited to stay. Was this, there's another point that might run into some of the other days as we look at things. So thanks for that, Leslie. I love the idea of backcombed Pharisees rubbed up the wrong way, and challenged deeply. Carolyn?
Oh yeah, it says he sent him on his way. I was just asking because you don't see. I personally, in my realm of my tiny little world, is I haven't seen people invite poor people or homeless people, and you sort of think, well, if it's your home and you invite a load of homeless people, I think the first thing you think is, oh my goodness, I don't know, sort of like be more worried. And I think is it our culture? I think I think it's probably our culture here, because you just don't see it, do you? And don't think about it. I don't even really know anyone that I could sort of like go and ask, really. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't think I do anyway.
I ran a War on Poverty conference once in Dunstable, and I invited the head of the Salvation Army, the then head of the Salvation Army, social action, to speak. So your point here, Carolyn, is very, very valid. And there were, I think, 4 food banks present. The leaders of 4 food banks were present in the room of this conference.
Yeah.
Right? And food banks was the latest trend at the time. There was a lot of things happening. And this lady, I asked her to speak on Jesus and his compassion. And she got up and Nigel's asked me to speak on Jesus and his compassion. I'm not going to do that. Some of you here want a little warm fuzzy. I'm not going to give you that. And then she brought a passage and said, Jesus said, bring the poor person into your home and feed them. What we're trying to do is give food so that we don't have to. and I was left in this awkward position of picking up the pieces, not offending all the food bank people and trying to work through all the good that was being done in the area. But she was absolutely prophetic and absolutely right to bring that challenge. And she was in a place where she could bring that from the Salvation Army, where she was seeing a lot that was happening with food banks and government and so on. She had a few challenges that she brought straight, fired from the hip. And I was so glad she did. But it was one of those conferences that it did leave an awkward silence after, which I had to get up and introduce the next guest. And some of our things were being done by food banks. So it was going to be interesting. But I think I think it's both and. I think it's supplying food for folks actually keeps that decency there, where people can actually, not feel embarrassed or behoved to people, or that kind of thing, and actually receive things and be given to. And in the home, it can be a bit awkward inviting someone. Oh, you think I need food? Is that why you're inviting me to your house? There's a lot of different things that go on, so it's quite messy. But I absolutely think the challenge you're bringing on this, Carolyn, is something I hope you keep bashing all week, because it's a really good point.
No, I'm not challenging it. I've just sort of noticed it really, because he sort of says to sort of like,
yeah.
It's almost like telling you to do it, isn't he? From what I can see, is telling you to do it? He's saying to do it, and so he's not asked.
I guess it's looking at the people on the fringes of society. And if you're having a barbecue, going, right, I'm inviting all these lovely people around. Actually, who am I inviting from the fringes?
Yeah,
I think that's a really good question to ask.
I just don't know anyone, and you don't think about.
But I think I think the fringes can. Well, I don't get too deep into this because we're going to do this on another day. But and I've also got a meeting to head to that starts at 10. But I think absolutely we need to look at this, and we need to let it cut into us and shape us. I think it's so important. But I think if you are going to take people into your home, you need to be aware of the risks. And there are things like that you need to take into consideration. I know with a lot of the Ukrainian refugees, that the thinking behind it, actually what kind of person has the home they're opening, but the question is also who are they inviting into their home, and how safe is that for family and kids and all the rest. So how does all that work? And so there's a lot into some of this, bringing people into your homes, that is very current in the UK at the minute, but also needs to be thought through from a wisdom point of view as well.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's hard to just you'd have to go out and actually meet them and know them, wouldn't you?
That's so what the government's done. So the government said, where there's a relationship, it can happen, and then they've got another system for something else happening. That seems to be the way it's gone. And so I know people in our local area who have been working with church plants in the Ukraine, and they have those people coming over And I know one of the church leaders locally was looking for car seats. He managed to get 2 car seats, all done. So even before people on the group I was on had a chance to reply, he'd already got the car seats. But there's things like that where they're providing for some of these families locally, inviting them into their homes. That's going on. And so that's a really good thing, but it's where there's relationship, where they've worked with these people in the past, or where they know them, and I think that's part of it. That helps. I think I have heard of someone inviting a homeless person into their home, and they died, and they had to deal with the police and everything else. But there was just kindness. And actually they gave, at least their last moments were in warmth and with a full belly and all the rest, so there's a lot. I'm not saying that as a scare story. I'm just saying, that the person that did that would have done it again, because they believe this passage, they believe things like this. But yeah, so some very interesting things into this. But thanks, Carolyn. Yeah. I'm wondering whether we call it a day there, because if we go any further we start getting into the banquet, and once we get into that we're into some running through some stuff that's huge. So I think we'll leave that tasty morsel for tomorrow and finish it here. But thank you for all your comments, thank you for the in-depth study we've done on this healing, and we look forward to Jesus making this dinner occasion even more awkward but more wonderful for the kingdom. So thank you all, and I'll move us offline here.
No,